Hi guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. My name is Melissa, and if you're new here, I'm always here on Mondays, Wednesdays, Friday, and every other Sunday except last night. And I talk about true crime, I also talk about missing children, and I talk about different topics that are important to talk about. So today's Monday, so that means I am here with a new true crime story. And today's story is about a serial killer that I think we all know about. If you don't, then you are too young to be on this video. I'm just letting you know. So if you're interested in any of that, go ahead and subscribe and hit that bell so you can notify every time I upload. Today I do have a warning, which I'm gonna start getting better at my warnings in some of the videos, because sometimes I just forget, because I researched these cases ahead of time, so I just forget that the warnings of some of these cases. So today, like I said, we're gonna be talking about a serial killer, and I think every single person in this who watches this video will know who I'm talking about. If you're not, or you don't know, you need to no, you're too young. So we're going to be talking about John Wayne Gacy. Today, warning about this video is that we are going to be talking about sexual assault in young men. So if you are not comfortable with that, I understand. You could come back on Wednesday and I will have a new video. That could be a video that you will be able to watch. So like I said, I think we all know who John Wayne Gacy is, who is was a messed up person, because he was put to death and is burning in hell like he should be. But yeah, I do not want to give all the way away. So before I start my videos, I do like starting with the poem of the day. So today's poem is the difference between school and life. In school, you've taught a lesson and given a test. In life, you're given a test that teaches you a lesson. So that is the poem of the day. So let's go ahead and start with this story, because this is I think it's going to be a long video, just because there's a lot to talk about. So let's start. Who is John Wayne Gacy, you ask? Well, good question, because I'm just going to tell you who he is. John Wayne Gacy was born in Chicago, Illinois on March 17th of 1942. The second child and only son of John Sterling Gacy, June 20th, 1990, and his dad was passed away in December 25th of 1969, and Marie Eileen Robinson, born May 4th to 1908 and passed away in December 6th of 1989. His father was an auto repair mechanic and World War I veteran, and his mother was a homemaker. Gacy was a Polish and Danish ancestry, and his family was Catholic. His paternal grandparents, who spelled the family name as Gates as an immigrant to the United States from Poland, the part of the German state of Prussia. Gacy's childhood. Gacy was close to his mother and two sisters, but endured a difficult relationship with his father, and an alcoholic who was physically abusive to his family. His father also betitled him, calling him dumb and stupid, comparing his affordable with his sisters. One of Gacy's earliest memories was of his father beating him with the electric bell by suddenly discharging components of a car engine he had assembled. His mother tried to shield her son from his father's abuse, which only resulted in the occasion that he was a sissy and mama's boy, who would probably grew up here. Despite the mistreatment, however, Gacy still loved his father, but felt he was never good enough in his father's eyes. And I'm going to put like a whole thing on this one, because I've heard this story so many times, and this is like one of the main things he talked about. I think today this would not be okay. Like today, I mean, who is not a mama's boy and who's not a daddy's girl? Like, we as humans, we always grew up, you know. I am a daddy's girl. I'm gonna tell you straight up, I am a daddy's girl from head to the toe of my I am a daddy's girl. I'm 34 years old and I'm still a daddy's girl today, and that's not gonna change. And I don't see nothing wrong with being a mama's boy. My daughter is a daddy's girl, so if I know that if I had ever had a son, he probably would be a mama's boy. And if someone has a problem with it, it would not be okay with me. I will not. No. In 1949, Gacy's father was informed that his son and another boy had been caught sexually fondling in a young girl. His father whipped him with the razor sharp as punishment. The same year, family friend and contractor was sometime molest Gacy and his truck. Gacy never told his father, but he's afraid that his father would blame him. Gacy was an overweight and an athletic child because of heart condition. He was told to avoid all sport at school. During the 4th grade, Gacy began to experience blackouts. He was hospitalized on occasion because of these episodes, and also in 1957 for a burst appendix. Gacy later estimated that between the ages of 14 and 18, he had spent almost a year in the hospital in tribute to decline of his grades to missing school. His father suspected these episodes were an effort to gain sympathy and attention, and openly accused his son of faking the condition as Gacy lay in the hospital's bed. Although his mother, sister, and few close friends never doubt his illness, Gacy's medical condition was never conclusively diagnosed. Father of the Year. Congratulations to you, sir. One of Gacy's friends in high school recalls several instances when his father ridiculously beat his son without provocation. On one occasion in 1957, he witnessed Gacy's father emerging drunk from the family basement to begin belittling them, hitting his son for any apparent reason. Gacy's mother attempted to intervene, and her son simply put up his hands to defend himself. According to the friend, Gacy never struck his father back during these altercations. So let's talk about his career. In 1960, at age 18, Gacy became involved in politics, working as his assistant presidential captain for a Democratic Party, located in his neighborhood. This led to more criticism from his father, who accused his son of being pasty. Gacy later speculated his decisions to become involved in politics was actually to seek the attentions from others that he never received from his father. The same year, Gacy's political environment began, and his father bought him a car. He kept the vehicle title in his own name until Gacy had finished paying for it. The monthly payments took several years for him to complete. His father would confiscate the keys to the vehicle if Gacy did not do as he said. In 1962, Gacy purchased an extra set of keys after his father confiscated the original set. In response, his father removed the distributor cap, keeping the component for 3 days. Gacy recalled he felt total sick and deranged after this accident. Now we're in Vegas. Hours after his father replaced the distributor cap, Gacy left home and drove to Las Vegas, Nevada. He found work within the ambulance service before he was transferred to work and attendant in a pulmonary. As a mortuary attendant, Gacy slept on a cot behind the embalming room. He worked there for 3 months, observing morticians blaming dead bodies. Gacy later confessed that one evening, while alone, he had claimed prayer into the coffin of a deceased teenager male, embarrassing crazing the body before expecting a sense of shock. This prompted Gacy to call his mother the next day and ask whether his father would allow him to return home. His father agreed, and the same day he drove back to Chicago. So he literally got in the casket of a dead person and just, He, on returning home, Gacy enrolled at Northwestern Business College. Despite having failed to graduate from high school, he graduated in 1963 and took a management training position with Nunn-Bush Shoes Company. In 1964, the shoes company transferred him to Springfield, Illinois, to work as a salesman. Eventually promoted him to manager of his department. In March of the year, he became engaged to Marley Mears, a co-worker. Let me just stop right there. Just right there. Why? He's smart. Obviously he is smart. Let's just for 1 second forget what he did. Let's just put that outside right now. But this man is smart, and the fact that he chose to do wrong in this world instead of doing what he would have done in this world if he would have not chosen to be a monster. How he would have probably been in politics. He probably would have had his own company. He would have done something in this world. Who do y'all think this Exhibit A? Question. Who is this remind y'all of? I'll wait. Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy would have been a good lawyer if he would have not just done the crazy things that Mr. Ted Bundy decided to do, Just some serial killers are smart, like college smart, but they decide to be a serial killer. Can somebody explain that to me? Because this is another example. Why? Gacy, why? If I see you if I see you, if I ever see you, that's the first thing I want to ask you. Why? Why, dude? Why? But let's go back to talking about him. During the courtship, Gacy joined the local JC and worked tirelessly for them, being named Carrie Man in April 1964. The same year, he had his second homosexual experience, according to Gacy, after one of his colleagues in the Springfield JCs piled him with drinks and invited him to spend the evening on his sofa. He agreed. The colleague then performed oral sex on him while he was drunk. By 1965, Gacy had risen to the position of vice president of the Springfield JCs. The same year, he was named in the third most outstanding JC in the state of Illinois. Now, we are in Ohio, and he is a KFC manager. After 6 months courtship, Gacy and Myers married in September 1964. Marilyn's father subsequently purchased 3 Kentucky Fried Chicken restaurants in Waterloo, Ohio. The couple moved there so Gacy could manage the restaurant, with the understanding that they would move into Marlene's parents' former home, which had been vacant for the couple. The offer of the exclusive Gacy would receive $50,000 per year, and the quantity about $334,000 as of 2022, plus a share of the restaurant profits. Following the obligation completion of management course, Gacy relocated to Waterloo with his wife. He opened a club in his basement where his employees could drink alcohol and play pool. Although Gacy employs teenagers of both sex at his restaurants, he socialized only with the young men. Gacy gave many of them alcohol before he made sexual events. If they rebuffed him, he would claim his events were simply jokes or a test of morals. Gacy's wife gave birth to a son on February of 1966 and a daughter in March of 69. Gacy later described this period of his life as a perfect. He had finally earned his father's approval when Gacy's parents paid a family visit on July of 1966. His father privately apologized for the physical and emotional abuse he had deflected throughout his son's childhood and obsolescence before applying, saying, "Son, I was wrong about you," and as he shook Gacy's hand. "Yeah, sir. You should have not done that long. You should have been apologizing a long time ago because you messed up your child, and that's why your child ended up as a serial killer." Just saying. I'm just saying. In Waterloo, Gacy joined the local JC's chapter regularly, offering extended hours to the organization in addition to the 12 and 14 hours day he worked managing the 3 KFC restaurants and meetings. Gacy often provide fried chicken, insisting on being called Colono. He and other Waterloo Jays were also deeply involved in his wife's sweeping, prostitution, pornography, and drugs use. Although Gacy would consider omissions and something of a braggart of the other JC, held him in high regard for his fundraising work in 1967 and named him outstanding vice president of the Waterloo Jays. In the same year, Gacy served on the board of directors. It does not mention his kid's name. I don't even go look for it because I tried to, but I don't think his kid should even be involved with the person like that. And I hope they changed his last name because I would have. In August of 67, Gacy sexually assaulted a 15-year-old Donald Vulture, the son of a fellow JC. Gacy lured Vulture to his house upon promise of showing him an erotic film regularly played at JC events. Gacy plied Vultures with alcohol, allowed him to watch a stage movie, then proceeded him to engage in marital oral sex, adding, "You have to have sex with the men before you start having sex with women." Over the following months, Gacy simply abused other youths, including one whom he encouraged to have sex with his own wife before blackmailing him into performing oral sex on him. Gacy tricked several teenagers into believing he was tentationous to conduct homosexual experience in the interest of scientific research and pay them $50 each. In March of 1968, Vultures reported his father that Gacy had sexually assaulted him. Vultures immediately informed the police, who arrested Gacy and subsequently charged him with performing oral sodomy on Vultures and the attempted assault of 16-year-old Edward Lynch. Gacy eventually denied the charges and demanded to take a polygraph test. The results indicate Gacy was nervous when he denied wrongdoing in relation to both young men. Gacy publicly denied wrongdoing and insists that the charges against him was political motivated, Worcester had opposed to Gacy's nomination for appointment as president of the Ohio Jersey server. Fellow Josie found Gacy's story incredible and relied to his support. However, on May 10th of 1968, Gacy was indicted in some charges. On August 30, 1968, Gacy pursued one of his employees, 18-year-old Russell Scherer, to physically assault Burgess in an effort to discourage the boy from testifying against him in court. Gacy promised to pay Scherer $300. Scherer agreed, and in early September, the Louisville illustrated to Solitaire Country Park, sprayed mace in his eyes, then beat him. Watcher escaped and reported the assault to police and defined Scholarship his attacker. They arrested him the following day. While essentially denying involvement, Scholarship soon confessed to assaulting Verscher, indicating he had done so at a Gacy request. Police arrested Gacy and laid in additional charges of hiring Scholarship to assault and intimidated Verscher against him. On September 12, Gacy was ordered to undergo a physical evaluation at the Teaching Hospital of the University of Ohio. 2 doctors examined him over a period of 7 days before calculating he had insulting personality disorder, the clinic terms for psychopath and or sociopath and psychopath, and was unlikely to benefit from any therapy or medical treatment, and that his behavior pattern was likely to bring him into repeat conflict with society. The doctors conclude he was mentally competent to stand trial. He was crazy, obviously. We all know he was a sociopath and a psychopath. Why didn't y'all keep? You know what? On November 7 of 1968, Gacy pleaded guilty to 1 count of sodomy relations to Voorhees, but not guilty to the charges related to other youth. Gacy claimed Voorhees had offended himself to him and that he had acted out of curiosity. His story was not believed. Gacy was convicted of sodomy on December 3rd and sentenced to 10 years in imprisonment to be served in Anosia State Penitentiary, and apparently 10 years wasn't enough for him. The same day, Gacy's wife petitioned for divorce, requesting she be awarded the couple home and property, so custody of their 2 children and alimony. The court ruled in her favor, and divorce was finalized on September 18th of 1969. Gacy never saw his first wife or children again. Good, they don't need to. He was a piece of shit anyways. During his incarceration into the Anson State Penitentiary, Gacy repeatedly occurred in protestation as model prisoner. With the months of his arrival, he had risen to the position of head cook. He also joined the inmate Gacy's chapter, increased in membership from 50 to 165 men in less than 18 months. He is known to have secured increase in the inmates' daily pay in the prison's mess hall, and to have supervised several projects to improve conditions for inmates in the prison. You see, he was smart. Like, he was smart. But no, he decided to do dumb stuff. By the summer of 1969, Gacy oversaw installation of miniature golf course in the prison retention yard. On June 6, 1969, Gacy was denied parole to prepare for a second scheduled parole hearing in May of 1970. He completed 16 high school courses, for which he obtained in his diploma on November of 1969. On Christmas Day of 1969, Gacy's father died from cirrhosis of the liver. When informed of his father's death, Gacy collapsed to the floor sobbing. His request for supervised competition leave to attend the funeral was denied. Gacy was granted parole within 11 months probation on June of 18 of 1970. After having served 18 months of his 10-year sentence, conditions of his probation include that Gacy relocate to Chicago to live with his mother, and that he must observe a 10 p.m. curfew. And I don't think that was the case on that. Why would you put somebody to go to Chicago instead of keeping them where he... I don't know. On his release, Gacy told friend and fellow Clarence Lane, who picked him up from prison and had reminded him steadfast in his belief of Gacy's innocence, that he would never go back to jail and that he intended to reestablish himself in Waterloo. However, in the 24 hours of his release, Gacy had relocated to Chicago to arrive there in June 19th and shortly there before obtaining a job as short order cook in a restaurant. On February 12, 1971, Gacy was charged with sexually assaulting a teenage boy who claimed that he had lured him into his car at Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal and driven him to his home, where he had attempted to force the boy into sex. The court dismissed this complaint when the boy failed to appear. On June 22nd, Gacy was arrested and charged with aggressive sexual battery and reckless conduct. The arrest was in response to a complaint filed by the youth who claimed that Gacy had flashed a sharply bash, lured him to the car, and forced him to perform oral sex. These charges were dropped after the complaint attempted to blackmail Gacy. The Ohio Board of Parole did not learn of these incidents, and 8 months later, on October of 1971, Gacy's parole ended. The following month, records of Gacy's previous criminal convictions were sealed. Why? Can somebody tell me why? Why was this man who literally has a problem and it's like they sealed it like nothing ever happened? Like his criminal thing was just completely erased. This is crazy. I think if these things was not sealed, and people knew about it, they would have had I think these things would have been prevented, but no. So now we're on the 8213 West Summer Avenue, and this is the house where everything happened and all the bodies were found. This one I think is going to be really, even me hearing other YouTuber talks about it, it still breaks my heart. So now that I'm going to talk about it myself, it's kind of going to be really hard because it's hard. But with financial assistance from his mother, Gacy bought a ranch house near the village of Norwich in North Wood Park Township, an incredible area of Cook County, itself part of metropolitan Chicago. His residence at the address of 8213 West Salem Avenue until his arrest in December of 1978, and according to Gacy's community, all his murders there. I don't know if this house is still there. I don't think so. I don't know if they because they did have to break it down to find the bodies, but I don't know if it's a new house that was built on top of it. I never thought about looking for that. Gacy was active in his local community and helpful towards his neighbors. He's willing loan his construction tools and Paul Snow from neighbors walks free of charge between the 1974 and 1978. He hosted annual summer parties which devoted to a particular theme. These events were attended by up to 400 people, including politics. Second marriage and divorce. In August of 1971, shortly after Gacy and his mother moved into the house, he became engaged to Carl Hoff, whom he had briefly dated in high school. They were married on July 1st of 1972. Carl and her 2 younger daughters from a previous marriage moved into Gacy's home soon after the couple announced their engagement. His mother moved out of the house shortly before the wedding. By 1975, Gacy had told his wife that he was bisexual after the couple had sex on Mother's Day that year. He informed her this would be the last time they would ever have sex. He began spending more evenings away from home, only to return in early hours of the morning with the excuse he had been working late. Carl observed Gacy's bringing teenagers boys into his garage in the early hours and also found gay pornography and men wallets and identification inside the house. When she confronted Gacy about who these items belonged to, he informed her angrily that it was none of her business. Following a heated argument when she failed to balance their checkbook correctly, in October 1975, Carl asked Gacy for divorce. He agreed to his wife's request, although by nature contents she continued to live in the West Summer House until February of 1976. When she and her daughters moved into their own apartment 1 month later, on March 2, the Gacy divorce agreed upon the false grounds of Gacy infidelity with a woman who was fetalized. In 1971, Gacy established a part-time construction business, PDM Contractors. The initial PDM were for painting, decorating, and maintenance within the approval of his probation officer. Gacy worked evenings in his contractions contract while working as cook during the day. Intentionally, he undertook minor repair work such as sign rating, pouring contract, and redecorating, but later expanded to include projects such as interior design, remodeling, installations, assemble, and landscaping. In mid of 1973, Gacy quit his job as a cook so he could committedly fill his construction business. By 1975, PDM was expandingly rapidly, and Gacy was working up to 16 hours per day. In March of 1977, he became a supervisor for PE System, a firm specialized in the remodeling of drugstores. Between PE System and PDM, Gacy worked on up to 4 projects and similarly and frequently traveled to other states. By 1978, PDM's annual revenue was over $2,000. Now here comes the clown, the famous clown that he's known for. Though his membership in local Moose Club, Gacy became aware of Jolly Joker Clown Club, whose members regularly perform at fundraising events, parades, and additional voluntary entertainment hospitalized children. In late 1975, Gacy joined the Clown Club and created his own clown character, Pogo the Clown and Patch the Clown, devising his own makeup and costume. He described Pogo as a happy clown, whereas Patches was more serious character. Gacy seldom earned money for his performance and later said that acting as a clown allowed him to regret into childhood. He performed on both Pogo and Patches and numerous local parties, politic foundations, charitable events, and children's hospitals. Sometimes Gacy would remain in his clown garb after the performance and briefly drinking at a local bar before returning home. Gacy volunteered publicly service as a clown throughout the years of his murder led him to being known as the Killer Clown. Much of the PDM's workforce consisting of high school students and young men. Gacy would often pursue his co-workers for sex or insist on sexual favors in return for acts such as letting his vehicles, financial assistance, or promotions. Gacy also claimed to own guns, once telling an employee, "Do you know how easy it would be to get one of any of my guns and kill you? And how easy it would be to get rid of the body." In 1973, Gacy and teen employee traveled to Florida to view property Gacy had purchased. On the first night in Florida, Gacy raped the employee in their hotel room. After returning to Chicago, this employee drove to Gacy's house and beat him in his yard. Gacy told his wife he had been attacked for refusing to pay him for poor quality paying work. In March of 1975, Gacy hired 15-year-old Anthony and Tanisha. 2 months later, he went to a Tuition home knowing the youth had injured his foot in an accident the previous day. 2 drank a bottle of wine, then watched heterosexual stage film before Gacy wrestled Antonio to the floor and cuffed him in his hand behind his back. One cuff was loose and Antonio freed his arm while Gacy was out of the room. When Gacy returned, Antonio, a high school wrestler, pounced upon him. He wrestled Gacy to the floor, obtained possession of the handcuffs, keyed and cuffed Gacy's hands behind his back. At first, Gacy threatened Antonio, then calmed down and promised to leave if he would remove his handcuffs. Antonio agreed and Gacy left. Antoshi later recalled that Gacy told him, "Not only are you the only one who got out of these cuffs, you got them on me." On July 26, 1976, Gacy picked up 18-year-old David Cram as a hitchhiker in Eastern Avenue. Gacy offered him a job with the PDM and began to work in the same evening. On August 21st, Cram moved into his house. The next day, Cram and Gacy had several drinks to celebrate his 19th birthday, with Gacy dressed as Pogo. Gacy conducted Cram into dominating handcuffs, his wrists cuffed in front of his body rather than behind. He swung Cram around while holding the chain linking the cuffs, then said he intended to rape him. Cram kicked Gacy in the face and freed himself from the handcuffs. A month later, Gacy appeared at Cram's bedroom door intending to rape him, saying, "David, you really don't know who I am." Maybe it would be good if you give me what I want. Crime resisted, Stanley Gacy, who left the room, stating, "You ain't no fun." Crime moved out on October 5th and left PDM, although he did periodically work for Gacy over the following 2 years. Shortly after Crane moved out of Gacy's house, another employee, 18-year-old Michael Rossi, moved in. Rossi had worked for PDM since May of 1976. He lived with Gacy until April 1977. Rossi sometimes assists Gacy in clowning at grand opening of business, Gacy as Pogo and Rossi as Patch. Gacy also entered local Democratic Party's politics, intentionally offering his employees to clean party headquarters at no charge. He was rewarded for his community service with appointment service on the Northwood Park Township Streets Lighting Committee, secondly earning the title of Apprentice Captain. In 1975, Gacy was appointed director of Chicago's annual Polish Construction Day Parade, an event he would supervise until 1978. Though his work with the parade, Gacy was graphic with First Lady Rosalind Carter on May 6 of 1978. The event later became an embarrassment to the United States Secret Service. The picture Gacy's wearing S-Pen indication personal given a special clearance. So now we're going to go to the murders. Gacy murdered at least 33 young men and boys and buries 26 of them in a crawl space of his house. His victims, including people he knew and branded individual lured from Chicago's Grand House bus station, Bughouse Square, or simply offer the streets with the promise of job with the PDM and offer drink or drugs or money for sex. Some victims were grabbed by force, others condemned into believing Gacy, who often carried a sheriff badge and has spotlights in his black automobile, was policeman. Gacy usually lured along victims to his house, although on one more than an occasion, Gacy also had what he called doubles, 2 victims killed in the same evening. Inside Gacy's home, his usual model operating was to pill a youth with drink, drugs, or generally gain his trust. He would then proceed a pair of handcuffs to show a magic trick. Sometimes part of the clowning routine, he triply cuffed his own hands behind his back and then superficially released himself with the key, which he hid between his fingers. He then offered to show intended victims how to release themselves from the handcuffs. With his victim meddling and unable to free himself, Gacy then made a statement to the effect that the trick is you have to have the key. Gacy referred to this act as restraining his victim as handcuffs trick. Having restrained his victim, Gacy proceeded to rape, torture his captive. He frankly began by sitting on or standing himself over his victim's chest before forcing the victim to fettle him. Gacy then inflicted acts of torture, including burning with cigarettes, making his captive inmate or horse, as he said, in their back, to pull upon makeshift reins around their necks, and violations for forgiving objects such as delos, prescription bottles, after he had summarized his captive, to immobilize his captive's legs before engaging in acts of torture. Gacy frequently manipulated their ankles 2x4 with handcuffs attached at each end, an act inspired by the Houston mass murders. He also known to have verbally attend many of his victims throughout their continued abuse, and to have dragged or forced several victims to crawl into his bathroom, where he purely drowned them in the bathtub before repeatedly receiving them, immediately him to continue his perleading assault, and assisting when the victim had pleaded to be killed as opposed to continue to endure torture. Gacy would make a statement to the effect that he would kill his victim when he wanted to. Gacy typically murdered his victim by placing a rope torture around their neck before precisely tying the rope with a hammer handle. He referred to this act as the rope trick, frequently informing his captive this is the last trick, and in at least one instant he had read part of Psalm 23 as his tying the rope around his victim's neck. Occasionally the victim had had convulsions for an hour or two before dying. Although several victims died by asphyxiation from cloth gags suffered deep into their throat, except for his two final victims, all were murdered between 3 a.m. and 6 a.m. After death, Gacy usually stored the victim's body under his bed for up to 24 hours before burying his victim in the crawl space, where he predictably poured quicklime to hasten the decomposition of his victim. Some victims' bodies were taken to his garage and embarrassed prior to the burial. So I'm gonna be telling out the name of these victims of some of the victims that were undefined, because I think there's some that still we don't know who they are. But I do not mean no disrespect on saying these names, okay? So the first is Timothy McKay. Gacy's first known murder occurred on January 3rd of 1972. According to Gacy later account of the following family party of the evening of January 2, he decided to drive to Silver Center in the Loop view a display of ice sculpture in the early hours of the following morning. He then lured 16-year-old named Timothy Jack McKay from Chicago's Greyhound bus terminal in his car. McKay was returning from a Christmas vacation in Michigan to his father's home in Alma, Nebraska. Gacy took McKay on a sightseeing tour of Chicago and then drove him to his home. The promise that he could spend the night and be driven back to the station in time to catch his bus. Prior to McKay's identification, he was known simply as the Greyhound Bus Boy. Gacy claimed he woke early the following morning with finding McKay standing in his bedroom door with his kitchen knife in his hand. He then jumped from his bed and McKay raising both arms in gesture of surrounding, tilting the knife upwards and currently cutting Gacy's forearm. Gacy twisted the knife from McKay's wrist and his head against the bathroom, while kicking him against his wardrobe and walked towards him. McKay then kicked Gacy in the stomach, doubling him over. Gacy then grabbed McKay, shooting, "Motherfucker, I'll kill you." He then wrestled McKay to the floor and stabbed him repeatedly in the chest as he strangled him. As McKay laying down dying, Gacy claimed he washed the knife in his bathroom and then went to the kitchen and saw an open cart of eggs and slab of unsliced bacon in his kitchen table. McKay had also set the table for two. He had walked into McKay's room to wake him while essentially carrying the kitchen knife in his hand. Gacy buried McKay in his crawl space and later covered his grave with a layer of concrete. In an interview several years after his arrest, McKay said that immediately after killing McKay, he felt totally drained. He yet noted that he had stabbed McKay as he listened to the convulsions and gasping for air, and he had experienced a many number of orgasms. He added, "That's when I realized that death was a limited thrill." So basically, he killed McKay for nothing, because all he went was to ask Gacy how he liked his eggs. That to me was second murder. Gacy said the second time he committed murder was around January 1974. The victim remains undefined. Gacy strangled him and then placed the body in his closet before burial. He later started that body fluids leak from his victim's mouth and nose staining his carpet. As a result, Gacy regularly stuffed cloth rags, the victim's own underwear or his socks, into the mouths of struggling victims to prevent such a leak from gouging. His other one was John Makichi. I'm not gonna say his last name, but it's John. On July 31st of 1975, John, an 18-year-old PDM employee from Lombard, disappeared. Car was found parked near the corner of Shading and Lawrence with his jacket and wallet inside and the key still in the ignition. The day before his disappearance, John had confronted Gacy over 2 weeks outstanding back pay. John's father, Gacy, immigrant, called Gacy, who claimed he was happy to help search for his son, but was sorry John had run away. When questioned by police, Gacy said John and two friends had arrived at his house demanding the overdue paid, but they had reached a compromise, and although all three had left. Over the following 3 years, John's parents called police more than 100 times, arguing them to investigate Gacy further. Gacy later admitted to John exiting his car at the corner of West Lawrence Avenue, waving to attract his attention. According to Gacy, John approached in his car stating, "I want to talk to you." Gacy invited John into his car, then invited him back to his home, ostensibly to settle the issue of his overdue wages. At his home, Gacy offered John a drink and then conducted him into allowing him his wrist to be cuffed behind his back. Gacy later confessed to having sat on this kid's chest for a while before he strangled him. He stowed John's body in his garage, intending to bury the body later in the crawl space when his wife and stepdaughter returned home earlier than expected. Gacy buried John's body under the concrete floor to the toll room extension of his garage in an empty space where he had intentionally intended to dig a drain title. In addition to being the year his business extended, Gacy freely admitted in 1975 was also when he began to increase the frequency of his secretions for sex with young males. He often referred to these junks as cruising. Gacy committed most of his murders between 1976 and 1978. He largely lived alone following his divorce. He later referred to these as his cruising years. Although Gacy remained incurious and Soviet-minded, several neighbors noticed ethical changes in his behavior after his 1976 divorce. These include seeing him keeping company with young males, hearing his car arrive at departure in the early hours of the morning, or seeing lights in his home switch on and off in the early hours. One neighbor later recollected that for several years the sound of muffled high-pitched screaming, shooting, and crying had repeatedly awakened her and her son in the early morning hours. She defined the sounds as emanating from a house adjacent to theirs on West Somerville Avenue. 1 month after his divorce was finalized, Gacy abducted and murdered 18-year-old Darnell Simpson. He was last seen alive in Chicago on April 6 of 1976. Gacy buried him under the dining room with sections of cloth locked in his throat. 5 weeks later, on the afternoon of May 14th, 15-year-old Randall Reflick disappeared shortly after returning to his uptown home from a dental appointment. He was last seen by his grandmother later in that afternoon. Hours after Reflick was last seen by his family, 14-year-old Samuel Splinter vanished as he walked home from his sister's apartment. He and Raffles were close acquaintances. Both were buried together in the crawl space. Investigators believe the two were murdered the same evening. On June 3rd, Gacy killed 17-year-old Lakeview teenager named Michael Bromley. He disappeared while traveling from Chicago to Waukegan. Gacy strangled Bonnie with the light lighter and buried him under the separate bedroom. 10 days later, Gacy murdered 16-year-old uptown youth named William Carroll, buried him into a common grave in the crawl space. Carroll seemed to have been the first of 4 victims known to have been murdered between June 13 and August 6 of 1976. 3 were between 16 and 17-year-old, and one undefined murder victim appears to have been an adult. On August 5th, a 16-year-old Minnesota youth named James Hackerson is last known to have phoned his family, possibly by Gacy's home. Hickerson died after suffocation. His body was buried into the crawl space between the body of a 17-year-old Bensville youth named Rick Johnston, who was last seen alive on August 6. Gacy is throughout to have murdered 2 further undefined males between August and October of 1976 and October 24th. Gacy abducted and killed teen friends Kenneth Parker, Michael Messier. The 2 were last seen outside a restaurant on Clark Street, Chicago. 2 days later, a 19-year-old construction worker, William Bundy, disappeared after informing his family he was to attend a party. Bundy died of suffocation. Gacy buried the body beneath his master bedroom. He had apparently worked for Gacy. Between November and December of 1976, Gacy murdered a 21-year-old named Francis Alexander. His last contact with his family was a phone call to his mother made sometime in November. Alexander was buried in crawl space directly beneath the room Gacy used as his office. In December of 1976, another PDM employee, 17-year-old Gary Kalsicki, disappeared. His girlfriend last saw him outside her house after he had driven her home following a date. Gacy had worked for PDM for less than 3 weeks before he disappeared. He had informed his family that Gacy had him in dish trash for some kind of drained titles in his crawl space. Gacy's car was later found abandoned in Niles. His parents and older sister Gianna contacted Gacy about closer disappearance. Gacy claimed that he had run away from home, having indicated before that he wished to do so. Gacy also claimed to have received an answering machine message from Gacy shortly after he had disappeared. When asked if he could play back the message, Gacy's parents, Gacy said he had erased it. On January 20 of 1977, Gacy lured 17-year-old John Sink to his house and predicts of buying his Palma satellite. He later confessed to strangling his bedroom, claiming Rosie was asleep in the house. Following morning, Gacy later sold the car to Rosie for $300. 2 months later, on March 15th, a 20-year-old Michigan native named John Privilege disappeared. Privilege was last seen leaving a near Northside restaurant. He was buried in the crawl space above the body of Francis Alexander. Shortly before his disappearance, Privilege had to mention he had obtained work with the local contractor. Gacy murdered an additional undefined youth and buried him in the crawl space the spring or early summer of 1977. The exact time of this murder is unknown. On July 5th, Gacy killed a 19-year-old from Crystal Lake, Matthew Bauman. Bauman's mother last saw him at a suburban train station. He had intended to travel to Woods Heights for a scheduled court appointment regarding an unpaid parking ticket. The following months, Rosie was arrested for stealing gasoline while driving car. The gas station attendant note to the license plate, and police traced the car to Gacy's house. When questioned, Gacy told officer he had sold the car to him in February, saying that he needed money to leave town. A check of the EVIN confirmed the car had belonged to. The police did not pursue the matter further, although they did inform mother that her son had sold his car. By the end of 1977, it is known Gacy had murdered 6 more young men between the ages of 16 and 21. The first of these victims was 18-year-old Robert Cleary, the son of Chicago police sergeant, last seen alive on September 15th. Cleary lived just 4 blocks from Gacy's house. He was murdered and buried in the crawl space. On September 12th, Gacy had flown to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania to supervise a remodeling project and did not return to Chicago until September 16th. Because Gacy is known to have been in another state at the time of Roy was last seen, this is citizen in to support Gacy's claim of assistance from one or more accomplices in several homicides. 10 days after Glibber was last seen, a 19-year-old former USA Marine John Maury disappeared after leaving his mother's house to walk to his apartment. Gacy strangled Maury and buried his body beneath the master bedroom. On October 17th, 21-year-old Minnesota native Russell Nelson disappeared. He was last seen outside his Chicago's bar. Nelson was looking for contracting work. Gacy murdered him and buried him beneath the guest bedroom. Less than 4 weeks later, Gacy murdered 16-year-old someone teenager named Robert Winching and buried him in this crawl space. On November 18th, 20-year-old father of one Tommy Boyling disappeared after leaving a Chicago bar. 3 weeks after the murder of Tommy Boyling, on December 19, 19-year-old USA Marine David Thompson disappeared after informing his mother he was to attend a rock concert in Hamden, Indiana. Gacy strangled Thompson with a ligature and buried him in the crawl space close to the body of John Maury. On December 30th, Gacy abducted a 19-year-old student, Robert Donald, from a Chicago bus stop at gunpoint. Gacy drove him to his home where he raped, tortured, and repeatedly dunked Donald's head into the bathtub until he passed out. Gacy taunted him with the statements such as, Aren't we playing fun games tonight?" Donald later testified at Gacy trial that he was in such pain that he asked Gacy to kill him. Gacy replied, "I'm getting around to it." After several hours, Gacy drove Donald to his workplace and released him, warning him that if he complained to the police, he would not believe him. Donnelly reported the assault and police questioned Gacy on January 6 of 1978. Gacy admitted to having had a slave sex relationship with Donna, but instead everything was consensual, adding that he didn't pay the kid. The money he had promised him, the police believed him and filed no charges. The following month, Gacy killed the 19-year-old Willing Kenter, who disappeared on February 16th after telling his fiancée, who knew Gacy, that he was to spend the evening in a bar. Kender was the final victim, Gacy buried in his crawl space. I'm sorry, but if y'all would have listened to the kid that got away, that apparently Gacy didn't kill, he would have been stopped. But no, y'all gave this man too many chances. On March 21st, Gacy lured 26-year-old Jeffrey Rincher into his car. Shortly after Rincher entered the car, Gacy chloroformed him and drove him to his house, where his arms and head was restrained in Pelluor device affixed to ceilings and his feet locked into another device. Gacy explained to Reginald he had complete control over him and that he intended to do whatever he wanted to him, when he wanted, and how he wanted. He then raped, tortured Reginald with various instruments, including light candles and whips, and repeatedly chloroformed him into a unconscious. Gacy then drove Reginald to Chicago Lincoln Park, where he was dumped unconscious but alive. Reginald managed to stranger his girlfriend's apartment. Police were informed of the assault but did not investigate Gacy. Randall was able to recall, though, the ace of the night and the Oldsmobile Kennedy Expressway, in particular side streets. He and two friends staked out the colors exit of the expressway, and in April, Regent saw the Oldsmobile, which he and his friends followed to 812 West Humboldt. Police obtained an arrest warrant. Gacy was arrested on July 15th. He faced trial for betrayal against Reginald. By 1978, the crawl space had no room for further bodies. Gacy later confessed to police that he considered stoning bodies in his attic intentionally, but had been worried about complexions erasing from leakage. Therefore, he chose to dispose of his victims off the I-55 bridge and the Des Plaines River. Gacy stated he had thrown 5 bodies into the river of 1978, one of which he believed had landed on his passing barge. Only 4 bodies were ever found. This from no victim thrown from the I-55 bridge into the Des Plaines River was 20-year-old Timothy O'Clair. He was murdered in mid-June after leaving his Dove Street apartment to purchase cigarettes shortly before his disappearance. Or had told his roommates a contractor on the northwest side had offered him a job. On November 4th, Gacy killed 19-year-old Frank Linginchi. His naked body was found close to and entombed in the Des Plaines River by 2 duck hunters in Channel on November 12th. On November 24th, a 20-year-old Evelyn Park resident, James Messier, disappeared after searching Thanksgiving dinner with his family. Messier had informed his sister the day prior to disappearing that he was working in the construction industry and doing all right. He was last seen alive walking in the direction of a bunkhouse square carrying a suitcase. On the afternoon of December 11 of 1978, Gacy visited the Nation Pharmacy and this claims to discuss a potential remodeling deal with store owner Philly Torr. While he was within the earshot of 15-year-old part-time employee Robert Peace, Gacy mentioned his firm often hired teenager boys at starting wage of $5 per hour, almost double the pay Pierce earned at the pharmacy. Shortly after Gacy left the pharmacy, Pierce's mother arrived at the store to drive her son home so the family could celebrate her birthday together. Pierce asked his mother to wait, adding that some contractor wanted to talk to me about a job. He left the store around 9 p.m., promising to return shortly. Pierce was murdered shortly after 10 p.m. at Gacy's home. Gacy later stated that at his house he asked Pierce whatever there was anything he would do for the right price, to which Pierce replied that he did not mind working hard. In response, Gacy stated good money could be earned by hustling. Although Peace was dismissed, Gacy dumped Peace into demanding handcuffs before saying, "I'm going to rape you and you can't do anything about it." Peace began weeping. He also stated that he has placed the rope around Gacy's neck and the boy was crying scared. Gacy admitted to having received a phone call from a business inquisition as Paisley lay dying, suffering on his bedroom floor. So now the investigation. When Paisley failed to return, his family filed missing person report with the Des Plaines police. Tarfer named Gacy as the contractor. Peace had almost likely left the store to talk about the job. Learning Joseph Carson, whose son attended Mine West High School like Paisley, chose to investigate Gacy further. Having spoke with Paisley's mother on the morning of December 12th, Carson became convinced Paisley had not run away from home. A routine check of Gacy's criminal background revealed that he had understanding battery charges against him in Chicago and had several prison sentences in Ohio for the sodomy of a 15-year-old boy. Concert and two Des Plaines police officers visited Gacy at his home. The following evening, Gacy indicated he had seen two youths working at the pharmacy and that he had asked one of them, whom he believed to be Paisley, whatever they were, any remodeling materials behind the store. He was a man, however, that he had not offered Paisley a job and had only returned to the pharmacy shortly after 8 p.m. As he had left his appointment book at the store, Gacy promised to come to the station later that evening to make a statement confirming that indicate he was unable to do so that at the moment as his uncle had just died. When questioned as how soon he could come to police station, he responded, "You guys are very rude. Don't you have any respect for the death?" At 3:20 a.m., Gacy arrived at the police station covered in mud, claiming he had been involved in a car accident. Returning to the police station later that day, Gacy denied any involvement in Paisley's disappearance and repeated that he had not offered him a job. When asked why he had returned to the pharmacy, Gacy returned that he had done so in response to a phone call from Jeffrey informing him he had left his appointment book at the store. Detectives already spoken with Turfer, who denied calling Gacy. At the request of Detective Gacy, prepared a written statement detailing his movements on December 11th. Suspecting Gacy may be holding prey against his will at his home, these Pleasant police obtained a warrant search Gacy's house on December 13th. The search of Gacy property revealed several suspicious items, including several police badges and a 6M Verder starter pistol inside an office drawer, a surgery and hemorrhaging needle inside a cabinet. Gacy's bathroom, investigators also found handcuffs, several books on homosexuality and pederasty, with titles such as The Great White Swallow and Pretty Boys Must Die. 7 financial films capture of an annual tincture and a 19 and 46 centimeter dildo in Gacy's bathroom. A 39 and 97 2x4 with 2 holes drilled into each end, bottles of Valamine and Harper Tofina, and several driver licenses were found in the northwest bathroom. A blue hood park was found at top tool box inside the laundry room, and underwear too small to fit Gacy was located inside a bathroom closet. In the northwest bathroom, investigators found class of 1975 Maine West High School ring engraved with the initial JAS. Investigators also recovered a Nissan pharmacy photo received from a trash can alongside a 36 section of nailing rope. The Des Plaines police confiscated Gacy Ospel Mill and other PD and worker vehicles. Police assigned two-man surveillance teams to monitor Gacy on international 11 hours base as they continued their investigation in his background and potential environment in peace and disappearance. These surveillance teams consisted of Officer Mike Abortion and David Harmishes and Ronald Robinson and Robert Seltzer. The following day, investigators received a phone call from Michelle Rossi, who informed the investigator of Gary Costing's disappearance and the fact that another PN employee, Charles Henson, had been found drowned in the North River earlier that year. On December 15th, Des Plaines investigators obtained further details of Gacy's battery charges, learning the complaint. Jeffrey Wildron had reported that Gacy had lured him into his car, then chloroform raped and tortured him for dumping him with severed chest and facial burns and wrestling bleeding in Lincoln Park the following morning. In an interview with Gacy former's wife the same day, they learned of the disappearance of John McPherson. The same day, the Maine West High School ring was traced to John Allison Sink. An interview with Sink's mother revealed that several items from her son's apartment were also missing, including a Molt TV set. By December 16th, Gacy was becoming irritable with the surveillance detectives, regularly inviting them to join him for meals in restaurants, occasionally for drinks in bars at his home. He repeatedly denied that he had anything to do with Perry's disappearance and accusing officers of harassing him because of his political condition or because of his recreational drug use. Knowing these officers were unlikely to arrest him on anything trivial, he tortured them by floating traffic laws and succeeded in losing his pursuit more than once. The afternoon crammed Constance to police interview in which he described Gacy's hard-working lifestyle and open-minded attitude about sex between men. Cran also revealed that because of his poor timekeeping, Gacy had once given him a watch, explaining he got it from a dead person. Investigators conducted a formal interview at Rosie on December 17. He informed then Gacy had sold vehicle to him, explaining that he had brought the car from because he needed money to move to California. A further examination of Gacy's automobile was conducted on this day. In the course of examining the trunk of the car, investigators discovered a small cluster of fabrics they suspect to be human hair. That evening, officers conducted a test using 3 trained German Shepherd search dogs, determining whether peas had been present in any of Gacy's vehicles. One dog approached Gacy's automobile and laid on the passenger seat, and what the dog handler informed investigators was a death reaction, indicating Pacey's body has been present in the vehicle. That evening, Gacy invited detectives Opcher and Hermisher to a restaurant for a meal. In the early hours of December 18th, he invited them into another restaurant where, over breakfast, he talked of his business, his marriage, his activities as a registered clown, and at one point during the conversation, Gacy remarked, clowns can get away with murder. By December 18th, Gacy was beginning to display signs of strain from the constant surveillance. He was unshaved, looked tired, appeared anxious, and was drinking heavily. This afternoon, he drove to his lawyer office to prepare civil suit against the displaying of police, demanding that they cease their surveillance. The same day, the serial number of Nissan pharmacy photo found in Gacy's kitchen was traced to 17-year-old Kimberly Byers, a colleague of peace of Nissan's pharmacy. Byers admitted when he contacted in person that following day that she had worn the jacket on December 11th to shield herself from the cold. She had placed the receipt in the pocket just before she gave the code to Pierce as he left the store, claiming a contractor wanted to speak with him. This statement contradicts Gacy's previous statement that he had not contracted with Robert Pierce in this evening of December 11. So now they're going to do a second search warrant. The same evening, Rossi was interviewed a second time. This time he was more cooperative. He informed detective that in the summer of 1977 at Gacy's bed chest, he had spread 10 bags of lime in a crawl space Gacy's house. On December 19, investigators began compiling evidence for a second search warrant for Gacy's house. The same day, Gacy's lawyer filed a civil lawsuit against the Des Plaines police. The hearing for the suit was scheduled for December 22nd. That afternoon, Gacy invited the surveilling detective inside his house. Again, as Officer Robinson distracted Gacy for the conversation, Officer Scholl walked into Gacy's room in a youthful attempt to write down the serial number of the motor TV set the suspect belonged to John. While flushing Gacy's toilet, the officer noticed a smell he suspected could be that of rotting corpse emanating from a heating duct. The officer who had searched Gacy's house previously had failed to notice this, as the house had been cold. Investigator interviewed both Cran and Rossi on December 20th. Rossi had agreed to be interviewed in relation to his police links with John, as well as the disappearance of Robert. When questioned as to where he believed Gacy had concealed Pacey's body, Rossi replied Gacy may have placed the body in the crawl space, adding that he thought cars were stolen. Rossi agreed to submit a polygraph test. He denied any involvement in Pierce's disappearance, also denying any knowledge of his whereabouts. He soon refused to continue the question, and Rossi inconsiderate response to question while they attached to the polygraph machine reading, unable to return to define opinion as the trustworthiness of his awareness. Rosie did, however, further discuss the trench digging he did in the crawl space and remarked Gacy insisted that he not detect from where he was injected today. Cram informed his investigation of Gacy's attempt to rape him in 1976. He stated that after he and Gacy had returned to his home after the December 13th search for his property, Gacy had turned pale after seeing a cloth of mud on his carpet in which he suspected had come from his crawl space. Cram said Gacy had grabbed his flashlight and immediately entered the crawl space to look for evidence of digging. When asked whether he had been to the crawl space, Cram replied he had once been asked by Gacy to spray lime down there and had also dug trenches, which Gacy had explained were for draining pipes. Cram stated these trenches were 2 feet wide, 6 feet long, and 2 feet in deep, the site of graves. On the evening of December 20th, Gacy drove his lawyer office in Park Bridge to attend a scheduled meeting, ostensibly to discuss the process of his silver suit. On his arrival, Gacy appeared to disheveled and immediately asked for alcohol drink, whereupon some immediate flushed a bottle of whiskey from his car. On his return, Amir asked Gacy what he had to discuss with them. Gacy picked up a copy of Daily Herald from merchandise, pointing to the front page article covering the disappearance of Robert Peace. He said, "The boy is dead. He's dead. He's in a river." Gacy then proceeded to give Kimberly confessions that ran into the early hours of the following morning. He began by informing American Stephen he had been the judge, jury, and question of many people, that he now wanted to be the same for himself. He said he buried most of his victims in his crawl space and had disposed of 5 other bodies in Des Plaines River. Gacy dismissed his victims as male prostitute hustler liars to whom he gave the rope trick, adding that sometimes a work to find death stranger kissed on his floor with their hands cuffed behind the back. He had buried their bodies in crawl space and he believed they were his property. As a result of an alcohol he had consumed, Gacy fell asleep midway through his confession. Mary immediately arranged a psychiatric appointment for Gacy at 9 a.m. the morning. On one awakening several hours later, Gacy shook his head when informed by Mary he had confessed to killing approximately 30 people, saying, "Well, I can't think about this right now. I got things to do." I ignored his lawyer's advice regarding his scheduled appointment. Gacy left the office to attend to the needs of his business. Gacy later recollected his memories of his final day of freedom as being hazy, adding he knew his arrest was inevitable and the intent to visit his friends and say his final farewells. After leaving his lawyer's office, Gacy drove to a gas station where in the course of failing his rental car, he handed a small bag of cannabis to the attendant, who immediately handed the bags to the surveilling officer, adding that Gacy told him, "The end is coming for me. The guys are going to kill me." Gacy then drove to the home of fellow contractor, a friend, Ronald Rottle. Gacy hugged Rottle before bursting into tears and saying, "I have been a bad boy. I killed 30 people, give or take few." Gacy left Ron, drove to Cram's home to meet with Cram and Rossi. As he drove along, experiencing the surveillance officer know he was holding a rosary in his chain, praying while he drove. After taking with Cram and Rossi, Gacy had Cram drive him to schedule a meeting with the lawyer Leroy Stevens on the west side. Gacy spoke with Stevens. Cram informed the surveillance officer that Gacy had told him Rossi that he had confessed to over 30 murders with his lawyers the previous evening. Gacy then had Cram driven him to McLeod cemeteries where his father was buried. As Gacy drove to various locations that morning, police outlined that the former draft of their second search warrant specially searched for the body of Robert Peace in the crawl space. On hearing from the surveillance detectives that in light of his erratic behavior, Gacy may be about to commit suicide, police decided to arrest him on charge of possession of distributing cannabis weed in order to hold him in custody. At the former request for a second search warrant was present. At 4:30 p.m. on December 21st, the evening of hearing of Gacy's silver suit, Judge Marvin J. Peters granted the request for a second search warrant. After police informed Gacy of their intentions to search his crawl space for the body of Peace, Gacy denied the teenager was buried there, but confessed to having killed in self-defense a young man whose body was buried under his garage. Armed with the assigned search warrant, police and evidence technicians drove to Gacy's home, and the arrived office found Gacy had unplugged his drum pump, flooding the crawl space with water to clear it. They simply replaced the plug and waited for the water to drain. After it had done so, an evidence Lieutenant Daniel Ginty entered the 28 by 38 foot crawl space, crawled to the southwest area, and began digging. Within minutes, he had uncovered puffy flesh and human arm bone. Ginty immediately shot out to the investigation that they could charge Gacy with murder, adding, "I think this place is full of kids." A police photographer then dug the northwest corner of crawl space, uncovering a patella. The two then began digging in the southeast corner, uncovering two lower legs bones. The victims were too decomposed to be Peace, as the body discovered in the northeast corner was later underneath. A crime scene technician discovered the skulls of a second victim alongside this body. Later, a confiscation of the feet of the second victim revealed further skull beneath the body. Because of this, technician returned to the trash where the first body was underneath, discovering the rib cage of a fourth victim within the crawl space, confirming the scale of the murders. After being informed that the police had found human remains in his crawl space and that he would now face murder charges, Gacy told officers he wanted to clear the air, adding he had known his arrest was inevitable since the previous evening, which he had spent in the couch in his lawyer office. In the early morning hours of December 22nd, and in the presence of his lawyer, Gacy provided a formal statement in which he confessed to murdering approximately 30 young males, of all whom he claimed he had entered his own house willing. Some victims were referred by the name, but Gacy claimed not to know or remember most of the names. He claimed all were teenagers, male runaways, or male prostitutes, the majority of whom he had buried on his crawl space. Gacy claimed to be dug only 5 of the victims' graves in location and had his employees, including George, dig the remaining trash so he would have had graves available. One vitamin held from Brown Lake, another had been Michigan native. When shown a driver license issued to Robert Hastings, which had been found in his property, Gacy claimed not to know him, but admit that this license had been in the possession of one of his victims in January of 1979. He had planned to conceal the purse even further by convicting the internal crawl space with concrete. When questioned specifically about Peace, Gacy confessed to luring him to his house and strangling him on the evening of December 11th. He also admitted to having slept alongside Peace's body that evening before disposing of the corpse in December Plain River in the early hours of December 13th. On his way to the police station, he had been in a minor traffic accident. After disposing of Peace, his vehicle had slipped off an ice-covered road and had to be towed from his location. Accompanied by police, his lawyer, and his older sister, Gacy was driven to the I-55 bridge on December 23rd to pinpoint the pre-spot where he confessed to having thrown the body of Robert Pierce and 4 other victims into the Des Plaines River. Gacy was taken to his house and introduced to mark his garage floor with orange spray paint to show where he had buried the individual he had apparently killed in self-defense, who he named as John. To assist officers in the search for the victims buried beneath his house during his confession, Gacy drew a rough diagram of his basement on a foam Messier sheet indicated where the bodies were buried. 26 bodies were underneath from Gacy's crawl space over the next week. 3 more were also underneath elsewhere in his property. Cook County Medical Examiner Robert Stain supervised the exhumations. Each victim under earth from the crawl space were placed in a body bag, which was placed near the front door awaiting transportation to the mortuary. The crawl space was marked in section and each body was given an undefined number. The first body recovered from the crawl space was assigned a mark donating the victim as body 1. Gacy had buried his victim in northeast sections of the crawl space, directly beneath the room he used as his office. No cause of death could be determined. The body of John Berkeley was labeled as body 2. On December 23rd, investigators returned to under earth the 3 corpses which had been buried in the same trench as body 1. Body 3 was buried in the same crawl space directly above body 4. Alongside them, body 5 was buried directly beneath body 1. The victim was buried 36 inches below the surface of soil, indicate he was the first deceased to be buried in this common grave. The search for victims was postponed temporarily over Christmas. Former bodies were underneath. In December 26, bodies number 6 and 7 were buried in the same grave. Body 7 was found in fetal position. A cloth gag was found in the mouth, leading investigators to conclude the victim was more likely died of his asphyxiation. Body 8 was found within the tourniquet used to strangle him, still knot around his neck. Body 9 was found beneath a layer of contract and was found to have several stab wounds to the ribs. German circulation was Gary's first victim. Sorry guys, I need a drink. I told y'all this video was gonna be long. On December 27th, 8th, more bodies were discovered. Body 10th was buried face upwards, parallel to the wall of crawl space directly beneath the entrance of Gacy's home. Both body 11 and body 12 were found face downwards with the light literature around their necks, and both were buried beside each other in the center of crawl space directly beneath the hallway. Body 13 was found beneath the spread rooms. Body 14 and 15 were recovered from common grave, going to body 10. Both 14 and 15 were found with their head and upper torture inside spread plastic bags. Body 16 was found close to body 13, although in separate trench further north of the south wall. The victim was found with the cloth wretch launched deep in his throat, causing him to die of suffocation. The 17th victim was found with the ligature around his neck. The following day, 4 more bodies were exhumated. Body 19 was buried directly beneath Gacy's master bedroom, particularly to body 18, which was located beneath the spread room and found with the ligature around the neck. Body 20 was buried northwest corner of the crawl space, particularly to body 19. By December 29th, 6 more bodies were under earth. Bodies 22, 23, 24, 20, and 26 were buried in common grave, locked beneath Gacy's kitchen and laundry room, with body 25 located beneath Gacy's bathroom. Body 22 was found directly beneath Gacy's kitchen with a section of cloth, likely material, lodges his throat. 2 socks were recovered from the pelvic region. The victim was buried directly beneath body 21, recovery the previous day. The bones of victims 23 and 24 were congealed together in a section of cloth was found inside the mouth. Bodies 24 and 26. Body 25 was found beneath Gacy's bathroom, which is a section of cloth lodged in the throat. The final victim recovered from the crawl space was also found beneath the bathroom, buried 10 inches below the surface of the soil. The victims were found to have section of cloth lodged deep into his throat. Operation was suspected due to Chicago's blizzard of 1979, but resumed in March despite Gacy's assistance that all the buried victims had been found. On March 9th, body 28 was found wrapped within the several plastic bags and buried beneath the patio, apparently 15 feet from the barbecue pit in Gacy's backyard. On March 16th, body 29 was found beneath the dining room floor. All victims were discovered at 82-213 W. Sumler, where an advanced state of decomposition dental records and x-ray charts helped define the remains. 23 victims were undefined fatal dental records, with 2 further victims defined with skeletal trauma. These undefinitions were also supported with the personal air tracks found in Gacy's home. The head and the upper torso of several bodies beneath Gacy's property had been placed into plastic bags. Several were also found in the rope still around their necks. In some cases, bodies were found with frigging objects such as prescription bottle lodged into their pelvic region, the position of which indicate the item had been thrust into victim's anus. States include 12 victims recovered from Gacy's property died not of strangulation but of asphyxiation. Gacy vacant house demolished on April of 1979. These victims found 6 miles downstream from the I-55 bridge on June 30th was not conducted intentionally to Gacy. In January of 1979, the victim was defined using fingerprints records and a sective tattoo in his left piece, reeling Tim Lee in homage to Bruce Lee's. As Timothy Orkey, an autopsy was unable to rule out strangulation as the cause of death. The victim was number 31. Following Gacy's arrest, investigators discovered he was further a victim. Frank Langen's cause of death was sacrificed at autopsy as asphyxiation, though his own underwear being lodged down his throat, plugging his airway and effectively causing him to drown in his own vomit. He was assigned victim number 32. On December 28th, in further body link, Gacy was found 1 mile from the I-55. This victim was defined as James Messier, who Gacy confessed to having murdered shortly after Thanksgiving. Messier had been strangled with literature. On April 9th, 1979, in Milwaukee along Guernsey County, Torpey discovered a decomposed body entangled in exposed roots on the edge of the Plymouth River. The body was defined via dental records as being of that of Robert Peace. The same evening, a squaw's autopsy revealed that 3 wads of paper-like material had been shoved down his throat while he was still alive, causing him to suffocate. Gacy was brought to trial on February 6th of 1980, charged with 33 murders. He was tried to Cook County, Illinois, before Judge Louis Carper, and jury was selected from Crawford because of extensive press coverage in Cook County. At the request of his defense counsel, Gacy spent over 300 hours for doctors in mental conditional centers, Chester, and the years before his trial. He underwent a variety of psychology tests before a panel of psychiatrists determined whether he was mentally competent to stand trial. Gacy intended to convince the doctors that he had multiple personality disorder. He claimed to have 4 personalities: the hardworking, silver-minded contractor, the clown, the active politician, and the policeman called Jack Hanley, who he referred to as Bad Jack. When Gacy had confronted police, he claimed to be reliving the crimes of Jack, who disdained homosexuality and who viewed male prostitutes as a weak, stupid, and degraded scum. His lawyers obtained to have Gacy plead not guilty by reason of anxiety to the charges against him, presenting Gacy as a jerk and hilly character. The defense proceeded service psychiatrist experts who has the same Gacy. 3 psychiatric experts as Gacy trial testified that they found him to be paranoia, schizophrenia with multiple personality. The prosecutor present the case that Gacy was sensed and is fully control of his action. To support this conviction, they proceed several witnesses to testify to the permission of Gacy's action and the efforts he took to escape detection. Those doctors refute the defense doctor claims of multiple personality insanity. Crane Mercy testified that Gacy had made them dig drainage trench and spread bags of lime in his crawl space. Both said Gacy looked particularly into the crawl space to ensure that they and other employees they supervised did not detect from the precise location he had marked. On February 18th, Barbara Stein testified that all the bodies recovered from Gacy's property were remarkably decomposed and peripheral skeletons remains, and that all of the autopsy he performed, 13 victims had died of asphyxiation, 6 of liver circulation, and 1 of multiple stab wounds to the chest, and 10 undetermined ways. When Gacy defense team suggests that all 3 deaths were caused by a sudden exerting asphyxia, Stein called the hyperbole. Jeffrey Wildren testified in half of the defense on February 21st, recounting his oral region wept repeatedly while describing Gacy's torture of him in March of 1978. Asked whether Gacy appreciated to the criminal of his action, Reagan said he believed that Gacy was unable to confirm his action to the law's expectation because of the ability and animalistic ways he attacked me. During specific cross-examination relating to torture, religion, vomiting, and was excluded from further testimony. On February 29th of Donald Venture, whom Gacy sexually assaulted in 1967, testified to his ordeal at Gacy's hands and his recent attempts to discuss him from testifying by paying another youth to spread mac, hitting his face, and beating him. Russia felt unable to testify but did brief attempt to do so before being asked to step down. Robert Donner testified that week after Russia recounting his ordeal, Gacy hands on December of 1977. Donald was vividly distracted as he recalled the abuse he endured and came close to breaking down several times. As Donnelly testified, Gacy repeatedly laughed at him, but Donnelly finished his testimony. During Donald's cross-examination, one of Gacy's defense attorney, Robert Martin, attempted to distract his testimony, but Donald did not waver from his testimony of what had occurred. During the 5th week of trial, Gacy wrote his personal letter to Judge Garpton requesting mistrials, for reasons including that he did not approve of his lawyer's insanity plea, that his lawyer had not allowed him to take the witness stand as he had wanted to, and that his defense had not called enough medical witness, and that the police were lying with regards to verbal statements, and he had legally made the attack after his arrest, and that he, in any event, the statements were self-serving for use by the prosecution. Judge Kerper addressed Gacy's letter by informing him that both counsels had not been denied in the opportunity of funds. Some expert witness testified that under the law he had the choice whether he wishes to testify and was free to indicate as much the judge he wishes to do so. On March 11, final arguments by both prosecution and defense attorneys began. They concluded the following day. Prosecution attorney Terry Sullivan spoke first, attending Gacy's history of abusing youth, the testimony of his efforts to avoid detention, and describing his surviving victims. Bashing Donald is leaving death, referring to Gacy as the worst of all murders. Surveillance state John Gacy had count for more human devastation and than many earthly catastrophes, but one must tremble when thinking about just how close he came to getting away with it all. After the state's 4 hours closing, counsel Sam Messier spoke for the defense, admitted or argued against the testimony delivered by the doctors who had testified for prosecution, repeatedly citing that the testimony of the 4 psychiatrists and psychologists who had testified on behalf of the defense. Amir also accused Salvini of scarcely referring to the evidence present throughout the trial and his own closing argument, and an all-seeing hater against his client. The defense lawyer attempted to portray Gacy as a man driven by conclusion, was unable to control counting state, had not met the burden of proving Gacy's sentence beyond a reasonable doubt. In support of these arguments, the defense referred to this testimony of the doctor who had appeared for the defense, in addition to defense witnesses such as Jeffrey and former business associate of Gacy named Michael, both of whom had testified to the belief that Gacy had been unable to control his action. Amir then argued that the jury to put aside any prejudice that they had against his client and asked that they deliver a verdict of not guilty by reason of inciting, adding that Gacy was a danger to both himself and others, and that studying his psychologist's behavior would be a benefit to science. On the morning of March 12, William Coulter continued to argue to the prosecutor, referred to defense and condition of insanity as a shame, arguing that the facts of the case emerged Gacy's ability to think logically and control his actions. Kerr also referred to the testimony of one of the doctors who had examined Gacy in 1968 and had concluded he was insatiably personality capable of committing crimes without remorse and likely to be defined from social or secured treatment, stating that he had the recommendation of his doctor been ahead, Gacy would not have been freed. At the close of his argument, Calder removed photos of Gacy 22 and defined victims from a display board and asked the jury not to show sympathies, but to those just show justice. Kerr then asked the jury to show the same sympathy that this man showed when he took these lives and put them there. before throwing the stack of photos into the opening of the trap door from Gacy's crawl space, which had been introduced as evidence and was placed on the courtroom. After Kern finished his testimony, the jury retried and considered their verdict. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours and found Gacy guilty of 33 charges of murder. He was also found guilty of sexual assault and taking incurred liberty, which is child both convictions, and referred to Robert Priest. At the time, his conviction of 33 murders was the most for which any person in USA history had been convicted. In the sentencing phase of the trial, the jury deliberated for more than 2 hours before sentencing Gacy to death for each murder committed after the Illinois status and capital punishment came into effect in June of 1977. His execution was set for June 2nd of 1980. The death. On being sentenced, Gacy was transferred to the American Gracie Center, where he remained incarcerated on death row for 14 years. Before his trial, Gacy indicated contact with WLS-TV journalist Russ, to whom he granted numerous interviews between 1979 to 1981. And later collaborated with the author Tim Gerd, published the book Buried Dreams. They informed Gacy devolution to Johnny regarding this circumstance of his first murder would prove installment and establish the fine for his worst victim. On February 15th, 1983, Henry Burrs, a fellow death row inmate known as the I-57 killer, stabbed Gacy in the upper arm with the sharp wires as Gacy was participating in volunteer work program. A second death row inmate injured the attack, Williams Johns, receiving a purposeful stabs wound to the head. Both received treatment in the prison hospital for their wounds. After his congregation, Gacy read numerous law books and filmed voluminous motions and appeals, although he did not publish any of them. His appeals related to issues such as the validity of the first search warrant granted to Delos Plain Police in December 13, 1978, his objection to his lawyer insanity plea defense at his trial. Gacy entered contract that although he had some knowledge of 5 of the murders, the other 28 murders had been committed by employees who had keys to his house while he was away in business trips. In mid-1984, the Supreme Court of Illinois upheld Gacy's conviction in order to execution by lethal injection on November 14. Gacy filed an appeal against the decision, which was denied by the Supreme Court of the United States on March 14, 1985. The following year, Gacy filed a further post-conviction petition seeking a new trial. His then defense lawyer, Richard, argued that Gacy had been provided with an effective legal counsel at his 1980 trial. His post-conviction petition was dismissed on September 11th of 1986. Gacy appealed the 1985 decision that he be executed. The Illinois Supreme Court helped tell his conviction on September 29th, 1988, setting a new execution date of January 11th of 1989. After the USA Supreme Court denied Gacy's final appeal on October 1993, the Illinois Supreme Court formally set an execution date of May 10th of 1994. On the morning of 1994, Gacy was transferred from Middle Constitutional Center to Stavoning Correctional Center in Crest Hill to be executed. That afternoon, he was allowed to private picnic on the prison grounds with his family for his last meal. Gacy ordered a bucket of KFC, dozen fried shrimp, French fries, federal strawberries, and a Diet Coke. That evening, he observed prayers with the Catholic priest before being executed to the state Phoenix chamber to receive lethal injection. Before the execution began, and chemicals used to effect the execution, Soderfeld and Spell clothing, the FEI2 used to administer the chemical into Gacy's arm, complaining the procedure blinds conviction in the window, although which witness observed the execution were drawn. The execution team replaced the globe tube. After 10 minutes, the blinds were reopened and the execution resumed. The entire procedure took 18 minutes, and technologies blamed the problem on the prison official experience as conducting an execution, saying that he had correct execution procedures been followed. The completion would never have occurred. The error apparently led to Illinois adopting an electric method, lethal injection on this subject, and prosecutor Gacy trial Willing Kern said he got much easier death than any of his victims. According to Polly's report, Gacy was diagnosed with psychopath who did not express any remorse of his crimes. His final statement to his lawyer before his execution was the killing him would not compensate for the loss of others, and that the state was murdering him. His final spoken words was reported to be "kiss my ass." In the hours leading up to Gacy's execution, a crowd stampede over gathered outside Correctional Center. A vocal majority were in favor of the execution, although a smaller number of intended death penalty prosecutors were also present. Some of those in favor of execution were teachers hearkening to Gacy's privileged community service as a clown in breathing circles launched such as "No Tears for the Clown." The intended death penalty prosecutor present versus silence candlelight vigil. After Gacy's death was confirmed at 12:50 a.m. on May 10th of 1944, his brain was removed, and his position of Helen Morris, witness for the defense Gacy trial, who had interviewed Gacy and other serial killers intent to assault common perpetrators of violent psychopath, his body was cremated. And that is the case, the story of a psycho person who should be burning in hell by now, John Gacy. I was going to read the victims, but this video is long enough as it is, so y'all could go ahead and look for the victims that are have been I think there's some victims that have been let me see, hold on guys, I probably just could tell y'all the names. Okay, so these are the victims. I'm just gonna read the these are the victims that we know that have been undefined. So we got Thomas Durd. So we got Timothy Jack McKay, John Darrell Randall, Samuel G, Michael, William, James, Rick Lewis, Kenneth, Michael, William, French, Garrier, John Steve, Matthew, Robert, John, Russell, Robert, David, Tommy Joe, David Paul, William, Timothy, Frank, James, and Robert Jerome Pierce. And there's still more undefined victims, I think. So body 28, body 26, body 13, body 21st, and body 10 are still the victims that we don't know what their names. So any of y'all had any brothers, cousins that were in that area at that time, please put your DNA or call the police. Hopefully we get these victims' names, these victims get their name back. And I am so sorry to all these victims and family that went through this. I cannot believe these piece of shit of a human being could do this to these innocent boys who just wanted to work, who was willing to help. And his excuse is there's no excuse for you to say, oh, I probably know a few, but the other ones blaming his other co-workers. That's to me, it's I don't know. I don't know how these lawyers who represent these serial killers, how do y'all do it? Because I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I could not sit there and believe every word that comes out of my mouth, trying to help my client not get the death penalty, or help my client be found not guilty or guilty of insanity or whatever. I don't know how y'all do it, but I think this is one of my longest video. Probably won't be not my first longest video, but yeah, that is the story of John Wayne Gacy, who hopefully he is burning in hell. God, do not ask me to forgive him, because I cannot and will not do it. Okay, you make You may forgive people very hard, and he does not need to be forgiven. He is a piece of, you know what, and he should never ever, he should have never been born. But there is a new go check a new there's a new documentary on him on Netflix. Y'all should go check that out, and also go check while y'all there, do the Ted Bundy one too as well, because those are two good ones. They're both new. So yeah guys, I will see y'all Wednesday with the new case. Peace out.